Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. A new Iran deal holds the promise of ending war, but it also lands amid a contentious election year. Here this morning to dig into the details on Close-Up is former Senator John E. Sununu, who is running for U.S. Senate.
Good morning.
And to reclaim the seat he held from 03 to 09. So thank you for being here, Senator.
Great to be here.
So first, your reaction to this deal. A lot of Americans would like to see the conflict end, but is this the best way to do it?
Well, we got to get the Strait reopened. We have to make sure Iran doesn't get access to nuclear weapon. I think that's the goal and the objective here. Get back to focusing on the economy, which, as I travel around the state, that's what people are talking about. That's what I talked about when I announced my campaign, and it should be our focus because we still have issues with economic growth, wage growth, and affordability. And I've been focused on housing affordability, energy, healthcare, and that's where I'll stay focused.
The memorandum of understanding, it reportedly includes $300 billion for rebuilding and reconstructing Iran. Ted Cruz, Senator, said in response to that aspect of the deal, quote, "History teaches that giving billions of dollars to theocratic lunatics who want to murder us is a bad idea."
Totally agree. And I don't think the U.S. should provide any money for reconstruction. That's not where we should be headed. That's not right. It's not fair to American taxpayers. There's no way that we should take responsibility for investing in any Iranian infrastructure. They're going to have, if they abide by the terms of the agreement, they'll have the opportunity to raise revenues through economic oil sales and other things. No U.S. dollars.
And yet the administration is saying there are no tax dollars involved here at all. That almost begs different questions of where would that money be coming from? Would you be curious to know? I mean, if like...
Sure. I think everyone would be curious to know. But look, first and foremost, no U.S. dollars. We'll see how the negotiation evolves over time. But the strategic objectives, the national security objectives, shouldn't change. No nuclear weapons for Iran, verifiable inspection regime, and make sure they don't reconstitute their ballistic missile program.
Was Operation Epic Fury, this war with Iran, a wise move for the United States?
Look, if you're asking me if I would have done this, no. No, but when you look at the imperative of making sure Iran can't get access to a nuclear weapon, I think in the long run, our national security interests and those of the region and the world, because this does impact Europe, will have been supported.
Let's talk about the region. America's top ally, Israel, has also been critical of the deal. And let's zoom out a little bit here on the relationship, because things are very different now than when you last served. When you were in Congress and when you were in the Senate, you were willing to take a stand for the Palestinian cause writ large, more so than a lot of your Republican colleagues. Is that going to be different this time around if you go back to Washington? Well,
the focus there was on having some sort of a negotiated process that led to a two-state solution, to a peaceful settlement, disarmament of Hamas, obviously. I think we're a long way from there right now, but that still should be the long-run aspiration. If you really want to have a peaceful region, a disarmed region, a negotiated process is the only solution. We're beginning to see that take place in Lebanon with regard to Hezbollah, which is also a real threat to regional security and Israeli security, and that could provide a template for addressing the issue in Gaza and the West Bank as well.
So will your approach be different, though? Do you think you're going to be the same advocate that you were the last time around?
I think you look at the current issues and challenges and negotiations, and you provide thoughtful input. Absolutely, things have changed. Things have changed on the ground. Things have changed with regard to our relationship with different allies in the region. Things have changed physically with regard to Hezbollah's structure and strength in Lebanon, and their political power in Lebanon. So that's why I say I think we have an opportunity there to really engage. You have Lebanon and Israel talking together directly for the first time in decades. So that alone creates a very different environment and one where there's some opportunity.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you're the first Palestinian American to serve in the U.S. Congress?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not a historian.
Right. Yeah, and your family heritage is uniquely American. There's a lot of different bases that the Sununu family touches. But what do you make of this, when people say this is a genocide in Gaza. What do you think?
Well, let's be clear, because viewers may not know the family history. My grandfather grew up in Jerusalem. He was born in Boston, grew up in Jerusalem. My grandmother on my father's side was born and raised in El Salvador. My father was born in Cuba. So as you point out, you know, there's a great sort of family history of coming from different parts of the world, but obviously a very American and a very New Hampshire family, which I'm very, very proud of.
Okay. Genocide, though, I mean, are you on board with those claims? Do you think that
Look, that's an inflammatory word. And it's honestly one that the press should use a little bit less. There's been tremendous human suffering among the Israelis after October 7th. Absolutely devastating and heartbreaking, and the destruction that has led or that has followed in their attempt to disarm and destroy Hamas, and they certainly have a right to protect themselves. That destruction has also been devastating, and the goal should be the things I talked about before, right? Engage in a process that leads to disarmament, that leads to an opportunity for a peaceful solution, both in Israel and the West Bank vis-a-vis the Palestinians, and in Lebanon as well, where the proxy is Hezbollah. But in both cases, the funding has historically come from Iran. And that's underscores the imperative of dealing with Iran aggressively, shutting off funding wherever we can for those proxies.
Your potential opponent in November, Chris Pappas, is getting asked a lot about the Senate nominee in Maine. And again, the disclaimer, here we are talking about Maine and New Hampshire. I've never talked about Maine so much on this program. But do you think voters in New Hampshire will be swayed by this association argument that Pappas needs to distance himself in some way from Graham Platner?
Well, I think it's a question of being able to stand up and say what you really believe. And you've got a socialist who's had a Nazi tattoo on his chest for over a decade. This wasn't a youthful indiscretion. And Chris Pappas isn't really willing to stand up and say whether that's right or wrong. And I think it underscores a pattern with Chris, and I don't think he's a bad guy, but he voted with the Speaker Nancy Pelosi 222 out of 223 times. That's not New Hampshire. He's obviously not really making decisions on his own. And his legislative record is really a big zero. I mean, he's been in the House for 8 years. He hasn't left any mark. Over the last 6 months, he voted to shut down government, he voted to defund law enforcement, and he voted for a national car tax. Now, I don't know anyone in New Hampshire that's for a national car tax. This is not right for New Hampshire, and it's certainly not right for the U.S. Senate. You know, we deserve someone who has an ability and a record to have an impact. And I've written and passed legislation important in New Hampshire, protecting the White Mountain National Forest, banning internet taxes, standing up for civil liberties. So that's a really big contrast between the two of us.
You know, in some ways, this is a reversal of roles with Pappas and Platner, and how Republicans have had to respond to when President Trump says or does things that can be controversial, and everybody runs around with the tweet and things like that. So is there something where you can be unequivocal about with Trump that you can say, hey, I opposed this guy, he was wrong on X? What is that?
Sure. Well, a number of things. We've talked about them in the past. The Victims Fund, $1.8 billion. No need for that. We have a process where people can, if they've been harmed, can sue the federal government and recover. We don't need a special standalone fund. Russia, not nearly tough enough from the beginning. We should have had secondary sanctions in place early, much earlier than they were even contemplated, and we still don't have those in place. I would also waive tariffs on any building materials, right? We have an affordability issue. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. Housing affordability is right at the top for both younger workers, people who are buying a house for the first time, and older families as well. So get rid of the tariffs on any building materials, help bring those building costs down.
And yet we see, you know, Bill Cassidy, you know, John Cornyn, Republicans not even just being an independent voice, if they don't toe the line enough, Trump just kind of zaps them and sends them away. How do we know that's not going to happen to you if you decide to be yourself down there in the U.S. Senate?
Oh, trust me. I'm not worried about any other job. I'm not worried about running for re-election. I don't need an appointment. I don't need to make anyone in my leadership happy. I just need to stand up for New Hampshire every single day. I've said it since the day that I announced. That's the only thing that I'll be focused on. And I'm fortunate that I have the experience of having served. I also have a track record of taking those very stands, whether it was for reforms to the Patriot Act against President Bush, whether it was for New Hampshire's environment and legislation that I wrote. I've never hesitated to do what I think is right for the Granite State.
All right, Senator Sununu, thanks for your time on Close-Up. We'll see you one more time at the end of the summer.
Great to be with
Appreciate
you.
it.
Happy Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to my dad as well. He's 87 next week. Still has 1,000 opinions. Just ask him.
I was going to say, we got to get back here sometime. Thank you, Senator Sununu. Happy Father's Day to all.